homie Joyce.
Pete Forcelli, what's up? What do you say? Everybody, welcome to the 10-4 Tavern. What's up, Pete?
Not much, brother. Another Tuesday night, man. We got Joe Del Duca joining us. It's gonna be fun. We'll have some interesting conversations. But no, man, it's good to see you. You know, the weather's been good here, man. Got to get some exercise in today, so I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah. All right. Well, listen, everybody. Welcome to the 10-4 Tavern today. It's June 16th, 7:05. It's now 7:06. We were about 30 seconds late from getting the intro going, but welcome to the 10-4 Tavern. Again, we have a great guest tonight. Got retired Deputy Inspector Joe Del Duca, retired out of the DA's office, but he'll tell you all about that because he was the first one to do something a little interesting in his career. But one of the ways, a quick way to measure our people, I know we did it, Pete. I don't know if you did it, Joe. If you did it, good guy, good cop, and you always wanted to hear both. And I think Joe Del Duca, good guy, good cop. So, Joe, welcome to the 10-4 Tavern, buddy.
Thank you. I appreciate that, Tommy. It means a lot coming from both of you. You know, it really means a lot. And I look at some of the prior guests that were on this podcast, like just titans of law enforcement, like Chief Ramon and Chief Boyce. Like, yeah, I don't know what I'm doing on here, but I appreciate you getting me on here. Thank you very much.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. You're welcome. So, buddy, we got a good show tonight. We're going to talk about Joe and his career and how he came up on the job and then going through the job, and then he's got some other interests as well that he spends time on. Not only does he work for a law enforcement technology provider, but he also is very much involved in fraternal organizations and meaningful organizations, which he'll get into too. The National Academy and the fraternity and the alumni and the power that they all bring together as a unit after graduating, and you'll hear about that. And then everyone knows Tunnels for Tower. Certainly every one of our listeners, I bet you they know Tunnels for Towers, and Joe will talk about that. So again, with that, Pete, anything else before we get into Joe?
No, it's gonna be fun. We got a lot in common, I think. I've also, I'm with the Flea Hall Foundation as the director of law enforcement affairs. So again, man, we talk about it off camera. You don't just walk away from this profession if you really love it and just forget about it. You still feel the need to be tied to it in meaningful ways, and obviously Joe's still being tied to it in very meaningful ways with the two foundations he's mentioning. So no, it's good stuff, man. I can't wait to hear more about him.
Yeah. So, like any good tavern, they're serving up some adult beverages. Pete is sticking with his steady home drink with the Espolon tequila. Is that right? We still got tequila going, Pete?
Yes, it helps with your glycemic index. It helps regulate your sugar and get you there a little faster than beer.
Yeah, and I my menu, I didn't put it on, but I'm going mezcal again last week to this week. I thought we had good luck last week, so I don't want to break the curse, So I'm going to go mezcal as well, and it's because it was the first thing I saw in the liquor cabinet, and I just grabbed it. To be honest. But Joe, I understand you're a little under the weather today, so H2O for you.
Yeah, I like 100 and almost 101 temperature today, trying to fight something off. So, I figured it was better, but I did put it in a red solo cup to make it look good. I figured it was better. I'm usually a bourbon or wine type of person, but I figured the medication is beef. I probably should just stick with the H2O instead of passing out for you guys.
Yeah, it's a good call. It's a good call. With that being said, Joe actually said the comment that everyone says. It was pretty fun. You're not going to break my shoes for not drinking tonight at the tavern, right? And the reason why we don't do that is there's a reason. So, Pete, you're up.
Yeah, man, I say it every episode. I've been through some things. Many of us have. You see things you can't unsee on this job. If you're in a bad place, that's normal. It's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay not to do something about it. So if you're in a bad spot, man, talk to somebody. Ask for help. It takes courage to ask for help. It doesn't take courage to sit there and suffer in silence.
Yeah. So if you're drinking to self-medicate, don't do that. Please call somebody, reach out, get some help. But thanks, Pete. We appreciate that, and it's always our message every week. So, all right, let's get into it. Joe, where'd you grow up, and how do you become a cop?
So I grew up in a place called Brooklyn. It's kind of where my story begins. I grew up in a place called Gravesend, Brooklyn, which is, people usually say if you're from Gravesend, you always say Sheepshead Bay, but it's really Gravesend where I live on East. I grew up at my grandmother's house. Grandparents were a big influence on me, as well as my parents. But I grew up in my grandmother's house on East 13th Street. I went to St. Edmund's Grammar School, St. Edmund's Catholic School in Brooklyn, from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. And it kind of really, and I always say this, it kind of, I don't know, kind of set the stage for my life. I had a really good childhood in that neighborhood, in that school, with friends that some of them I still speak to today. And it kind of laid the groundwork, really. I truly feel that those early years of someone's life, is super important, right? So, left Brooklyn, kicking and screaming. But my mother moved us out of Brooklyn when I was 15 years old to Staten Island. So I left kicking and screaming because I love Brooklyn. I love the neighborhood. So really my high school years and beyond were really on Staten Island, where I went to Newell High School. To be honest, I was really, if we're telling the truth, so I was just an okay student in high school. I guess like every adolescent, the things that entice a young male adolescent, I guess, got to me. In my high school years, and I was really an average student. Coming from that high school. To get my bachelor's degree, I kind of stepped it up in the school area after high school, to be honest with you. And why did I become a cop? Like, I don't know, I just always admired, the police, even as a young kid in Brooklyn. When they used to come to our school and speak about, they used to speak to us at times. And going to Brooklyn, there's always some kind of action going on in my neighborhood where the police would have to come, for various things. And I just always saw them when they got there. I was like, hey, these guys are here to save the day. I just always admired the police. It's something that I kind of took me as a child. I really, police family, police background in my family. My father was a lifer in the Army. My brother was in the Air Force. Every generation since my family has been here, including the original Joe Del Duca, served in World War One. So every generation of my family has served in the military. I was the black sheep of the family. I became a cop. So
I would actually probably chalk that up to just the timing. When you were coming up at those ages, things weren't really happening the way they were previously before that. Would you say that's fair? It's exactly why I probably didn't serve, is because there was just nothing happening and it was kind of thing. So yeah. So anyway, didn't mean to cut you off.
It did come like during the Desert Storm years. But the police at that point, the police department was really right in front of me. It was like kind of right around the corner. And one thing I always promised my mother I'd do if I ever became a cop was get my bachelor's degree. It's the one thing she said. She really didn't want me to become a cop, but I said, she goes, "You got to promise me one thing: become a cop. You got to get your bachelor's." And back then, now everyone has a bachelor's degree. Seems like, but that then when my family was like, "Hey, you got to get bachelor's." Not many of us in this family have got a bachelor's degree. You got to get. So I made that. I made that promise. Bachelor's. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah. Hey, Joe, we're going to have to just pause for a second here. The comments are coming in and the audio is not good, and I can definitely hear it coming in and out on your end. Maybe we try, I don't know, maybe if you sign out and sign back in. Because you're probably on a lot of conference calls, so you probably don't have this normally, right?
I've never used the platform. Maybe that's it. I don't know. Let me try. I'll be right back.
Yep.
It happens. It happens, folks.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah. Staten Island got Nolan. Nolan's on the air, asking because he's a Staten Island guy, so he's going to dig in and he's going to give us about I don't know, a couple hundred nuggets of tidbits of information and useless information, and some of it might be valuable, but he seems to know everything about everything. He really does.
I know
And
nothing.
I say that I'm breaking his shoes, but let me see what's going on here.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So I say that lovingly, Nolan. I find it fascinating how much you know about a lot of stuff. So, anyway, yeah. So Joe will come back on, everybody, and we'll get that going. I think you'll find Joe's career interesting. Kind of bounced around. He's probably got some good stories in narcotics and stuff. But I think the DA story for me will probably be interesting on some of the stuff that's going on over there. So let's go. Let's bring Joe back. Okay. Hey, Joe.
How about now?
So far, so good. Sounds good. Let's give it a run. All right. So we were bachelor's degree. You promised your mom.
Yeah. So, it's the one thing my mother always made me promise her when if I was ever to become a cop, that I would always go to school, which I kind of saw through. Really, after I was on the job, I actually went, I was close. I needed like 3-4 classes, and the police department kind of called before I got that bachelor's, but I always made that promise, and I ended up getting it.
We just lost it again. Whew. I don't know what that's all about. Yeah, do you have a headset by any chance, Joe?
I do.
Yeah. All right, everybody, we're going to try and get this tech. We had a good green room tech check, and then
We've had worse. We've had people
like Eddie Murphy's Law. Yep. So anyway, so while we're doing this, tomorrow morning, 8 o'clock, we'll just do a little house cleaning now while Joe's getting his headset on. John, Eric, and Marlon are going to be doing the Knicks parade preparation for the Finest Unfiltered at 8:05 tomorrow morning. And then tomorrow night at 5:05, Ron and Rob got a doubleheader. The NYPD prepared. They'll do some follow-up on that. And then the parade as well. So you'll hear the different perspectives coming from Marlon, Eric, and John in the morning, and then the executive perspective at 5:05 tomorrow night or Wednesday. Yeah. So how we doing, Joe?
How's that sound?
good.
Yeah, I think that might be it. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. And if not, we'll bring on the sign language. I have somebody downstairs. We'll bring on the sign language. And
Tommy, you got the guy from South Africa that did the wedding. If you remember, that person didn't really know sign language.
yeah, exactly. So, all right, let's do it again. Bachelor's degree, you promised your mother, and then on your way into the taking the test and getting on the job.
Yeah, so the police department came calling in the summer of '93. I was the first class I went in, and the mayor was David Dinkins, and the police commissioner was Ray Kelly. And when I graduated, the mayor was Rudy Giuliani and Bill Bratton. So we were the first class to graduate under the Giuliani/Bratton administration, and the first class trained in 9mm handguns. First class ever to be trained in 9mm. So started in the police academy. I kind of fell in love with it from day one. To be honest, in the police academy. Although I feel like in the police academy, they tell you, "Hey, this isn't really the job, kid." And they're right, but I kind of fell in love with it from the beginning. And I was lucky enough out of the academy. I wish I still had that hair, man. I really do. I was lucky enough out of the academy to go to the 72 precinct in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. And the picture there was my first partner. We were like the Irish-Italian combo, in my second car. And his name's John Rogers. Actually, he's a retired lieutenant. He now works for the Department of Homeland Security as the NYPD liaison. But, we always
What's his name? Say it again.
John Rogers.
Oh, okay. Sean Rogers. Okay.
So, you know, we always say, like, even to today, you know, like that was probably the most fun you could have on the job, was riding around Sector, you know, back then in the early 90s. And we even throughout our career, even though, you know, when we made rank or whatever, we always said, we can go back to, you know, we can go back to riding around a sector car, they would pay us what they're paying us now, we would do it, you know? So, you know, it was always the, kind of the, you know, the most fun that, you know, I guess you could say, you know, you had on the job, was riding around the sector car. That was a fun time. And the 7-2 was really a great place to work. There was a lot of, you know, a lot of people with a lot of experience there, you know, and like my childhood, I was lucky enough to be around good people and a lot of experience to kind of show me the way. You know, like your childhood, I think when the first few years you come on the job kind of sets the stage for the rest. You know, and I was lucky enough to go to the 7-2 and be around those people that kind of just taught me the right way. So.
You came on at a good time, man. I mean, the same thing like when I came on and Tommy came on. There were guys that stuck around for 20, 30. I had one field training officer that had 42 years on the job. He was actually on his way out the door. Now guys do 20 and out. So, I mean, you know, we had the benefit of learning from some really experienced people. But today's cops, you know, I'm not saying in all instances, but they don't have that same benefit that we had, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, obviously being in the tech world now, it's just a different job. It's a different police. Like, they have to learn how to be different police. It's really that simple. With you know, like we wouldn't be able to teach young cops on the job nowadays, right? So, so you're right. Like, I think that, you know, even when I left, you know, I was lucky enough to be around like really experienced people in the squads that I worked with. You know, that's really half the battle, surrounding yourself with people.
Well, and look, I'll confess something to you. I actually like the powder blue shirts better than in the navy blue. I know I'm an outlier. I know Tommy liked the dark because it's more flattering to his figure. I didn't care.
That's true.
Yeah, no, I think it's called French blue was the actual name of the shirt, if I'm not mistaken, was French blue.
Yeah, they used to get very dirty, right? Tommy, like they used to, right? They used to get dirty. Like, if you spill something on them, that's it. You know, you've done some tour. You know, the pens, like you used to put the pens in the pocket, and that always used to mess it up.
Yeah.
So, I think the powder blue shows your experience at least. You know, and, you know,
Well,
the blue might look a little better, but the powder blue says you got a little experience.
Yeah. Well, I have a little PTSD from powder blue shirts because I went to a vocational high school and I wrenched a little bit, auto mechanic for a couple of years. I worked in a transmission shop on Staten Island, Gibraltar, Bay Terrace, and I worked at Meteor Motors in Sunset Park, Mazda Saba Peugeot dealer, and we used to both shops had light blue shirts and dark blue, work trousers, and it was the same exact uniform for me. And I have a lot of busted knuckles, stitches, burns, and dirty fingernails all those years that I couldn't get clean. And when I'm wearing those powder blues and navy blue trousers, I'm like, man, I feel like an auto mechanic. So that's where that comes from. So I not only love the dark blue shirts, but the commando sweaters that Transit had were the bomb. They were the bomb. Those were good.
You're right. Yeah, definitely.
So anyway, so listen, 7-2. Did you work for Jack Cambria at any time? Did he pass through?
So Gentleman Jack was kind of before my time. You know, he had already left the 7-2 before I got there, and you know, you would hear about him because he was a legend there, pretty much. So you would always hear about Gentleman Jack, but he was a little before my time. I actually got to meet him later.
Right. Yeah. So one last uniform comment. Nolan again. He liked the winter hat. So Breesley Bruin, right? The flaps. So they were good. They're better than the knit hats.
I had good hair back then, so I was, I wasn't going to mess up my hair. Now I'm definitely.
Yeah. So you move on. You make you make sergeant right out of 7-2.
Yeah. I got out of 7-2. I had maybe like 7 years on, 8 years, something like that. You know, I think that was, a good number to have, like to get promoted sergeant. You can't, although I would have liked to have more experience, to be honest with you, like you can't put a price on the experience you get before you make, before you become a boss. I had like 7-8 years. If I did it again, I probably would try to maybe be a detective or get more. But, I really feel like, the kind of cop you are is really the kind of boss you are. That's the, that usually follows suit. So I make sergeant in 2000, and I go to PSA 3, where I never worked in Brooklyn North, never worked in housing. So that was new to me. But I ended up, for some reason, catching on with the special ops team there, because I had search warrant experience from being on the 7-2 SNU team, where I really did a lot. I executed a lot of, I should say our team executed a lot of search warrants, but I got to know how to do that process really in 7-2 SNU. And I get there, and it was kind of something they lacked, and I was like a patrol sergeant, just trying to help them out, trying to show them the way there on how to write search warrants, and go to the DA's office and get a prosecutor assigned, and kind of away you go, right? I mean, I don't have to tell you guys, right? So I kind of had that knack, and other people really didn't have it there at the time, and I ended up doing pretty good there. I ended up being the SNU sergeant there at one point, which was a great gig. Had great cops that worked there. The Brooklyn North cops are just tremendous. I always say Brooklyn North cops are like, they're like the Marines. They're usually the first ones on the beach. They were just tremendous street cops in Brooklyn North. Just the experience, the value, being around them. I was always, and that's one of the lucky parts of my career. I just, I was always surrounded by great people. To me, that's always, I tell my kids all the time today, like, surround yourself with winners. Like the conversation's different. Surround yourself with winners. You surround yourself with 5 winners, you'll be a winner. So that's really what I did. When I first started the SNU team, I ended up being the anti-crime sergeant there. I got to work with great people there too. Tommy, one of the guys I know, Seamus from Q. I had known Seamus prior to, Seamus and I had some mutual friends together, including John Rogers, my ex-partner. They were part of that Irish guys. I like to call them the Irish mob.
Yeah. Well, if you're working with Seamus, then you're not getting through here with just going through your career. You're going to go back to the 7-2, and you're going to go back to SNU as a sergeant maybe, and PSA 3, and you got to have some funny stories, bro. It's not just about your ascension to deputy inspector. We got to hear some stories.
Yeah, I mean, oh man, where do I start?
Don't worry, statute of limitations are up. They're good.
Yeah, that's true. So, man, there's funny stories. There's stories that like were, I don't want to say bad, but like we were precarious positions, I guess you could say. But I go back to the 7-2 SNU team, and I just literally started in the 7-2 SNU team, and listen, I again, I was around good people. I was around older cops. I was young at the time. I was like 27 or 28, and I was on the SNU team with like people that had like 15 years, 10 to 15 years on. So I was like the young guy on the crew, and they had a lot of experience, and it just so happened, I had my first search warrant that I did, and it basically cultivated a CI, who basically gave me some information. Long story short, and we do a search warrant on the perp's house. We get there, we kind of hung out in front. We always used to have a thing like we just camped out in front for a couple hours to see if his or her car pulls up, that type of thing. We camp out. We realize that the subject's not there. So me and the sergeant actually go, whose name was Tom Garrity. We actually go into the hallway of the apartment. We go to the door, and we're like, all right, should we just take the door and just wait for him to come back, or do we try to get in some other way? And I was like, yeah, let's just take the door. Like, I was a young kid. I was like, I'm gonna scratch through the floor right now. We'll hope for the best. And Tom Garrity was like, no, Joe, let's look at this window. And there was like a frosted window, like in front of the door. And Tom took this like tool that he had, I don't know what kind of tool, like a Leatherman type of tool, and he like picked the molding off the door, off the window. And with that, the glass came off, and he reached in, and we just walked in. He wasn't there. And we just, we camped out in front of them, started our search, and it just so happened, we kind of hit pager, 2 guns, black Talon bullets, almost 2 kilos of coke, which for a snoot team is like, for a snoot team back then is like, holy, it's like the mother load, So it just so happened, I gotta be honest, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just got really lucky for my first search warrant. And then I kind of said to myself, hey, I like doing this. I'm going to make this one of my things. Really, study this and understand how to do this better. The only reason why I even had the search warrant, or was in my name, I should say, is because I was around all that experience. So, it ended up paying me that I was able to kind of do that. And that was kind of like my first introduction to the snoot team. And I kind of rode that through my career in the 7-2. But there was so many times where I think people do it more Brooklyn North, but in that business, it seems like everybody wants to fight you for or run from you for a bag of weed sometimes. And then you catch them and like, why are you running for a bag of weed, right? So, but that was like my first good snoot story. Was my first search warrant. It lit something in me, because then I thought like every search warrant should be like that. And then after that, 2 crack vials, and you're like, oh, you kind of think it's all going to be like that. It's not. But it's just something kind of lit a fire in me with that. Like, hey, I got to learn how to do this better. I got to really immerse myself in this process. Because this is a really good way to really fight crime and get this shit off the streets.
Yeah. So in addition to some funny stories, but I'm sure you probably saw some unbelievable things as well. The 7-2 is probably an interesting place. Kind of like it's got some crime. It wasn't overly busy, wasn't tremendously busy, but mostly Latin, right? Mostly Puerto Rican, was it?
Yeah. At the time, yeah. Now it's probably more Chinese than anything, but there was still a Chinese contingent up on 8th Avenue, but mostly Latin, big Latin King place. I had to quickly learn about who the Latin Kings were.
Didn't the Latin Kings originate out of 7-2, did they not?
Yeah, I was a kid from Staten Island. I was like, who's the Latin Kings?
Yeah.
I do have a good funny 7-2 story that I'm going to embarrass my partner now. So one of the funny stories we still talk about to this day is we responded with another sector to an EDP call. We get a call basically saying, hey, this woman is basically threatening to kill herself. So we go to the apartment. We're greeted by the caller. The caller states, the caller basically says like, hey, my partner, there were 2 females. My partner, she didn't take the medication. They threatened to kill herself. She really didn't take the medication. So we said, okay, we're with another step there. So we go and speak to her, right? And Joe Rogers goes up to her. And he's like, oh, dear, how are you? Are you okay today? She's like, yeah, I'm feeling a little down, but everything is good. And John's like, okay. He goes, did you take your medication today? And she goes, well. And then she just flips, does the full 180 flip. She just starts screaming, I want to kill myself. And she starts screaming. So with that, John has some kind of brilliant idea to kind of try to get her full Nelson. And if you go back to that picture of John, it'll probably do it a little justice. So John does this thing where he tries to get her in a full Nelson, right? And she's a strong woman. And then all of a sudden, John's on her back, and she starts bucking like this, just bucking. And you could see his hair like flopping. He had that beautiful Irish thin straight, and it was going up and down. She starts bucking. And I don't know what came over me, but I just started laughing. I just started cracking up laughing. And I thought to get up like, hold on, man, hold on.
Yeah. Oh, he's fading out. You're fading out again. Yeah. All right,
What's the
yeah. All right, so let's see if it settles out a second. Because it seemed like it was building up while the longer you talked. Okay, so and PSA 3. So Nolan is calling out. So here's one for Nolan. 72 Park Slope, Red Hook. Is it Red Hook the 7-6?
Yeah, right into the 7-6.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Nolan. All right. Anyway, so and PSA 3, some crazy stuff there. I know PSA 3 very well from the 7-9, and from transit back in the day. Border. Oh, he's going to argue with me now. So he's going.
Well, it does border the 7-6, right? You know. At my Third Avenue, it borders the 7-6. So.
Yeah, so PSA 3, when I was in transit, District 30 also was a PSA 3 overlap, Marcy and all that stuff. That's a crazy place.
Yeah.
But I think the PSA 2, the hard way, I think they called it, right? 2 the hard way? Or 3 the hard way.
3 was the hard way. Yeah.
That's what I meant. That was probably a wild place too. How long did you do in PSA 3?
I was there to like 04. Like spring of 04. I went to. I ended up getting promoted to lieutenant. So 2000, I get there. I'm there for probably 4 years. Like I said, working with great people, and I was lucky enough to be a new sergeant, the anti-crime sergeant there at one point. Yeah, great place to learn, great place to work, great place to be around a lot of cops. Still to this day, you know, we have a whole group of us from that. You know, I was there September 11th, so you know the people you're there with during September 11th, you kind of, as you guys know, you kind of gravitate to for the rest of your life, right? So, yeah, we got a group of us that we still to this day. We have a yearly excursion to Atlantic City just to kind of keep us up.
Yeah. So just, I got 2 questions. Well, a statement and maybe a question. Well, they're both questions. So, so you're there from 2000 to 2004, and so we had a previous guest, Mike Prate, detective in the 7-9, and then Jimmy Glynn, the FBI agent. They ran the RICO out of Lafayette Gardens and that whole war. So you were there for that war when these guys were all shooting the shit out of each other. You know, Popsy and World and all of those guys, Thor, all of those cats. Like that place was wild. And I have a funny story about these white kids moved into a house right around the corner from Lafayette Gardens. And this is like 2000, 2001. And they're sitting on the front stoop, and a bunch of kids walk up and they do a home invasion. They push them into the house and do a home invasion. And so we get there, and Tommy Caffrey's the detective, and we get there, and Corey Daly. Did you know Corey Daly from the 7-9 crime? Yeah. So Corey Daly was there, and it was off project, so it was a PD job, not a housing job, but housing LG plays into it because they were like, yeah, you know, this is unbelievable. Just yesterday we were sitting on the stoop and we heard like 100 gunshots, and apparently there was a big shootout in Lafayette Gardens between the cops, housing, and PD and the Mutts. And we're like, holy shit, that's 2 crazy days for you. All those shots fired yesterday and then this and that. And they're like, yeah. And we're like, how long you guys lived here? And they go, 3 days. It was literally day 2 and day 3 of them moving into the neighborhood. And so Corey Daly says to them, well, that's what you get when you move to Bed-Stuy, bro. And the kid goes, whoa. What do you mean Bed-Stuy? And Corey Daly goes, are you freaking kidding me? This is Bed-Stuy. It's like the heart. And he goes, no. Our real estate agent told us it was Bedford Heights.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, you should get their money back.
I swear to God, Tommy Caffrey had them come view photos for the home invasion the next day, and they took like 17 hours to get there. They didn't come until late, and Tommy Caffrey squeezed me for overtime to do the photos. And they were on day 4. They were looking for a new apartment.
I don't blame them. Yeah,
so
they didn't do their research. They didn't do their research, as far as I know. How does it sound better now? I went in the settings. I checked everything. I turned everything off. So I don't know if that's
good now.
Looks good. And the second question I was going to ask. So if you want to share your 9/11 experience.
Yeah. So you know, my story is some kind of like everybody has their own 9/11 story, no matter where you live. Right? So everybody has their own 9/11 story, no matter where you live, the way you work. It changed the world forever, right? So, I don't have some heroic story. I was actually home, on 9/11, the morning of 9/11. I had just switched actually to 6 at night to 2 in the morning with my SWAT team. I did that. My daughter was 1 year old. And I was kind of like Mr. Mom during the day. And my wife was a school teacher. She would be mom at night. So I used to pass her off, and I used to go to work, for 62 shift. And I had just switched, So I wake up that morning, and, like any other morning, I get up. My daughter usually wakes me up, when she gets up. And I remember kind of going on, trying to sign in on the internet in the morning, and it was dead. Phone line was dead. Check my phone, and it's dead. So then, I see my cell phone. And I never kept my cell phone on at night. Back then, I didn't. I had one of those contacts, I flip open my phone. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I turn my phone on, and my phone is just blowing up. Just blowing up. And the first voicemail was from my mother. And she's like, you're in this World Trade Center. And she was just screaming. I mean, we walked to work on the 78th floor of South Tower. And I just heard her say World Trade Center. And I was like, what is she talking about? So, something clicked on me. I put TV on, and boom, there it was. And kind of there it was. And so, obviously in shock, like everyone else. We got my daughter together, and I brought her to my mother-in-law's, and I headed in like everybody else eventually, but by the time I got on the Verrazano Bridge, the second tower was down, it was just like, and then you get to the Gowanus, and as you know, it's really just in your face on the Gowanus, by the way, so, and I just remember like the ash coming down like snow on the Gowanus highway. And then, it was traffic was highly unusual because it was just first responders allowed on the highway. And there was a cop kind of on the Gowanus directing traffic, and he was full of stuff, just full. And I had a bottle of water, and I just handed it to him. And he didn't drink it. I just kind of poured it on his face, So I get to work, and then we just kind of mobilized. And at the time, by the time I got to work, as like the NYPD was worried about, like, at least it was the beginning of an attack. We literally thought like our city's under attack. We are the front line. We're the Marines right now, right? So obviously you're worried about infrastructure. You're worried about a million other things being attacked. As all of us look, this was just the first wave of something bigger, right? So, I remember going to downtown Brooklyn, guarding, the Brooklyn Bridge, places like that for the first night, really all the way around to the next morning, like 7, 8 in the morning, and came back maybe 4 o'clock the next day, and that would be my first time going to Ground Zero. And, I just remember the first time I got there, I literally had to sit down and collect myself for a minute. Like, you don't realize what that's like until you actually get there. Like, you can see the pictures on TV, you can see the video, you can watch it all day long, but once you get there and you see it, you smell it, and what happened, like, I literally had to collect myself. Like, I can remember what I had for lunch yesterday, but I can remember every sight and sound from those days. I remember everything. Like, it's ingrained in my head. So, it was just an awful time. I want to say an awful time, but it, as we saw the worst of people, we kind of saw the best of people. I was able to walk amongst heroes, as you know. Still to this day, people are fighting. That attack is still happening to this day, post 9/11, right? And for some families, that attack still happens. One of the things Tulsa Towers kind of reminds people of, and we still got to be there for those people, because for some families that attack still happens.
Yep. Hey, we had a comment from RC 135 2002. Duke is a great boss. We have some.
Oh, Mike Enrique. Mike Enrique. Good man. Good cop.
Mike Enrique.
Yeah. Mike Enrique was a really good cop that I was able to work with at the end in Manhattan DA squad. He ended up being one of my guys. I trusted him so much. He was on the protection detail with Vance. So Mike Enrique, excellent cop.
Yep. And talking tech shorts, the yellow brick. We'll get into that later, for sure. Okay, so and then the subsequent. Did you go to the ground zero, or did you go to a landfill or morgue or anything? Any of those other assignments?
No, really both. I was in ground zero probably the first couple of weeks. Off and on. I shouldn't say the whole time, but definitely off and on. And then I was at the landfill a lot. I don't know if this because I was from Staten Island a lot, but the Staten Island landfill. I still remember. I say this all the time. When I first moved to Staten Island, it was the big joke on Staten Island. Like land, there's two things that you could see from space. The Great Wall of China and Staten Island land.
That's right.
Staten Island. And I don't remember, but maybe like a year or two before September 11th, they closed the land, like to kind of make it environmentally safe, which I don't think it could ever be in our lifetime anyway. But they closed it, and like the houses went up in Staten Island. Oh, they closed the landfill. It's going to be better. And then after September 11th, the largest crime scene unit in the history of law enforcement.
Yeah.
So I worked at the landfill a lot and know that wasn't ground zero, but sifting through debris and finding things that you can give back to a family and not just body parts. I'm talking anything, like an ID or a picture or a medal or like that is something that is just ingrained in my head forever. I just remember finding things, like even airline seats. I couldn't see one desk. Like I never found a desk. Like how many desks were in the trade center, right? Like so, you didn't find a desk. You would just find these odd things. That you knew, like you get, you sift through, you get it, you put it in a bucket, and you bring it to the trailer. Where the crime team would take it. Those were some trying days. Long days.
I remember seeing and then you'd watch it out of the ground. That's what I remember the most about the landfill.
So I'm going to say that there's something with StreamYard tonight because if I just muted me and Joe, and it worked really good. So hold on a second. Pete, I'm going to go on mute 1 second. Just talk real quick.
Yeah, I heard my feedback before, so it's something definitely going on with the system. So when I'm not talking, I'm going to mute too, Tommy. This way, maybe we can fix the problem.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to mute as well. So Joe, when we ask you a question, we're going to ask you a question, and we're going to mute, and then you can talk. This is definitely a StreamYard technology problem because if it's happening to all three of us in all three different locations, let's do that. So okay, so you make 2004. You make lieutenant in 2004. Is that right?
Yeah. I make lieutenant in 2004, and I was sent to. I went to the 7th precinct on the Lower East Side, also known as Fort Pitt. And again, leaving Brooklyn as in my childhood, I went there kicking and screaming because I was a Brooklyn cop, and there was no way I was going to go and work in Manhattan South, right? So, I went there kicking and screaming. There's actually someone I knew who was a chief at the time, and he kind of said to me, he's like, Joe, at this stage, I had maybe like 12, 13 years on. He's like, at this stage in your career, you're going to like Manhattan South. He goes, I'll tell you what, if you don't like Manhattan South, call me in 6 months. I'll put you anywhere you want to go. I'll put you on Staten Island. And I'm like, yeah, I'll see you in 6 months. So, and the rest is kind of history. I didn't leave Manhattan South for the rest of my life. after that. So I went to the 7th. 7th was, I went to the 7th, my new command, and what I found was family. Really, I ended up, being just getting along with the people out there. In the 7th, one of them is chief of transit right now, Joe Del Duca. But the 7th had really great people that I ended up being lifelong friends with, and it just it worked out for me. I ended up being the special operations. I ended up taking over special operations there in the 7th, which was the job as a lieutenant I always wanted. And then the only two jobs I really wanted as a lieutenant really was special operations lieutenant and squad commander, and being a detective squad commander. Those were really the only jobs.
The 7th. Oh my God. The 7th had some rough neighborhoods there too, though. So I mean, the 7th isn't like a lot of Manhattan South where it's kind of nicer neighborhoods. 7th Precinct had some places that were rough back in the day. Lillian Wald projects, Jacob Reese projects. Trying to think what's the other one. I think the Brook houses as well. A lot of crime, man. A lot of robberies. A lot of the Asian folks that lived there were getting robbed by folks that came from the Lower East Side and whatnot. So that's a great place to be a cop. It's certainly a lot more stuff happening there than in some of the precincts just north of there.
Really quickly about the 7th is that it has a little bit of everything Manhattan South has to offer. It has crime. You can be a crime fighter there, and you can just hang out, in the 2 or 3 block radius where all the bars and clubs are. So it really had a little bit of everything Manhattan had to offer. I fell in love with the place right away, and like I said, I got the two jobs I only really wanted as a lieutenant: special operations and detective squad. And I was able to do both in the 7th, which was really a dream come true. So I ended up taking over the 7th squad, maybe like 3 years after I was in the 7th. I really just went across the hall from the special operations lieutenant, into the squad, where, I still say to this day, if I had to pick one favorite job that I ever had, it was being the SWAT commander, in the 7th. That was my favorite. I had cool jobs. Don't get me wrong. I had cool jobs, but that to me was the ultimate job. There's no one more important in the precinct than the SWAT commander. There's no more important job other than the CO, I would say. In fairness.
So, Joe, I'm going to put you on mute for a second. Let me ask a question. So, a couple things. So, Joe Lacaraza was the squad commander in the 7th before you. I don't know how long before you. I don't know if you knew him. He was an old transit guy. And the thing I learned from him about the 7th was it was a good place, great cops, great detectives, everything. But even more important, as a foodie, the restaurants were stellar. Stellar in the 7th, man. But I want to ask you, having never been a detective, but making the SOL jump to the squad commander, tell me how that was for you. It's a little bit of a non-traditional, but the job was changing. So it really wasn't as uncommon, but probably when you did it, it was uncommon.
Yeah, so you're right. And again, I'll go back to being a cop. Like I would have loved to be a detective. Like to me, that's they don't call them the greatest detectives in the world for no reason, and they really are. In my view, they're the best there is. I've been all over the country, in police departments all over the country now in my second career, and there's no bigger prestigious symbol than the Gold Shield of New York Detective, as far as I'm concerned, an NYPD Detective. So yeah, it wasn't an easy jump, but there was 2 good factors, I would say. I had a lot of the detectives that were in the squad were my anti-crime guys, so I had that going for me, and I trusted them, and they were great cops. Again, if I went to a squad that wasn't kind of set up for success, like I probably wouldn't have done well. I actually took over the 7th squad for a guy named Jerry Dowling. Who's actually a chief. I think he's still on, if I'm not mistaken. I know he was in special operations in the issue for quite some time, Jerry. But I took over for Jerry Dowling, who was an awesome squad lieutenant. So I had that going for me. And then I had 2 people that were, had faith in me. One was Walter Ward, who was the zone commander, who was a dear friend. Walter was just one of the best people I could ever work for. And then Chief Matarazzo, Uncle Al. He had faith in me. he basically, was the determining factor. He was the reason for me going there. He had faith in me. He picked me. Whatever he saw in me, I have no idea, but I really owe that to him. I really owe that to him because he went out on a limb for me. Kind of even left the squad empty for a little bit, waiting for my transfer, which is something you really you kind of roll the dice when you do that, right? So I owe a lot of that to him. He had faith in me, and it's just like I said, it was by far my favorite job in the police department. I was surrounded by not good detectives, great detectives. That you talk about, we all know the guys on the job, guys and girls on the job that you say could talk people with the handcuffs. Like I had a bunch of them there, and it just made life easier.
So Joe, in the 7th squad, listen, I had 13 people shot in a 7-9, nobody cared. 7th squad though, something happens there. You might probably had a couple of sensational cases, some newsworthy cases, anything we might know?
Yeah, probably the biggest case I did there, and I still think about it to this day. It's kind of one of those cases, as both you guys know, that just sticks with you for the rest of your life. It was the homicide of a kid named Glenn Wright. So Glenn Wright was a model student, and I forget what high school he went to, but he was a model student who was in the robot club of his high school. I never even heard of a robot club, but apparently this kid was in it. Okay, so Glenn Wright is at the Baruch houses. The Baruch houses, cleaning his grandmother's windows. Okay, on a Saturday afternoon, beautiful Saturday afternoon, and two people approached Glenn. Later find out they were all Latin King members, and they basically approached Glenn, chase him literally all the way around the Baruch project.
All right, everybody, he's frozen. Joe's frozen. So I'm going to attribute this to StreamYard again, since everything is related to yeah, you froze for a bit.
Okay. So
last thing I heard was chasing him around.
Yes, chasing him, literally running through his life around the Baruch project. The stabber is chasing him. He ends up trying to, from what he confessed, he ends up trying to stab him in the shoulder. As he does that, Glenn kind of shrugs his shoulders, and he ends up catching him right in the carotid artery. Where Glenn ends up back in his grandmother's hallway and basically bleeds to death and dies right there in the Baruch projects. So actually the anti-crime team, I want to say they were from the 9th, actually grabs some of the crew that were on the scene in Kansas. So obviously everybody comes back. I remember being home. I was home. I just sat down for dinner, and I got a call from one of my first graders, Kenny Perez. I literally just sat down to dinner at my dinner family, and Kenny's like, "Boss, this is going to be a homicide. I have no doubt." But he was literally in the hallway and Glenn bleeding out. I have no doubt this is going to be a homicide. So, I basically told my wife, like, saving food, I'll be back. And I threw a suit on, and I headed to Manhattan. And so then the question was, like, why, the guys we rounded up were all Latin Kings. One of them was a high-level Latin King, like a third crown of the Latin Kings. So, all right, why are these guys trying to hurt this model kid? Long story short, you come to find out that they were really going to the Baruch houses for looking for a kid named Junebug, who lived right across the street, right across the hall from Glenn's grandma. And Junebug apparently robbed this third crown Latin. I forget his name, man. It was like an easy Spanish name too, like Jose Perez or something like that. Junebug robbed this this Latin king's cousin or something like that. So they go to the Baruch houses looking for Junebug, and they think Glenn is Junebug. And it was just like such a horrible, horrible murder. But we ended up grabbing them. Some confessed. The stabber actually confessed that night, thanks to the detective work. There's a couple of things I remember, from that case. Like one going doing the 24-hour canvass the next day, and Glenn's father was just sitting on the bench in front of the house, in front of the Baruch houses, and the guy was just like in space, just like in shell shock still, and I that will ingrain in me forever, like his face and how he felt. Well, I should say how he felt. I can never know how he felt, but like I just remember going over to him and I was just like, listen, we're gonna get these guys. I'm telling you, you got my word, we're gonna get these guys. That's one thing that always ingrained in my brain, from that case. The other thing that was ingrained in my brain was that third Crown Latin King. Like, so we get the prosecutor there, the riding DA, and we had the guy for a while, and we really couldn't, other than him being at the scene, like we really had nothing on him at that point. Like, and I was like, I'm not letting this guy go. Like, I know he gave you one. Like, we're not letting him. The prosecutor was like, you gotta let him go. Like, we're not charging him right now, And I remember my zone commander, Walter Ward, he just looked at me, he goes, Joe, we'll get him. Don't worry about it. We'll get him. Like that. And the guy went to walk out of the 7th SWAT, and he turned around, he looked at the SWAT, and he goes, hey, I see you around, like that. And if I could have broke his jaw and got away with it, I would have done it. I was so pissed off, But as luck would have it, later in my time in the Manhattan DA squad, the prosecutor that ended up getting that case did a whole conspiracy case against them. And I was later brought into that case to kind of add some more flavor to it, because I was the SWAT commander that had it, and they ended up doing a lot of time. And that third Crown Latin King, I can't remember his damn name. I went through sentencing, and I wanted to make sure.
Jose Herrera. Yes.
I went to his sentencing, and I remember because he looked at me and said, "I'll see you around." I wanted to make sure he saw me around. So that was probably the biggest case I did. The one that really hit home the most was that.
How many homicides and how many non-fatals were you doing a year over there? You remember?
I mean, for the couple of years I was there, you really can't compare it to the people squads.
No, of course. Of course.
Maybe 10 homicides, 20 shootings, something like that.
So the reason why I'm getting to that is back in the heyday, pre-1993, 92, there was probably, whatever the numbers are, they don't matter. It was significantly a lot. And then by the time you're there, 2004 and stuff like that, it's pretty relatively quiet in comparison, but still a good amount of work because of what was going on there. And then not only in New York City, I'm not blaming New York City, but nationwide, we thought it was okay to just forget everything in 2020, and literally erased 27 years of super hard work by guys like yourself, Joe, and doing what you're talking about and everything we're talking about today. And so, I know there's some reports of what the crime rate is right now in New York. It looks like they're doing good on some categories, not so good on other categories. It's really an unbelievable thing. But across the country, I mean, just the last 5-6 years, now we're 6 years after the Summer of Love and COVID. I really, truly thought we would never go back. And then we allowed it to go, and we're kind of getting back. But just want to get your thoughts on kind of what you've seen, because you now work in tech, so you're servicing the customers that are dealing with this. What do you see around the country for that downtrend that you experienced and lived through, where you were able to work a homicide like it should be, not like just till the next body drops mentality like it was in the early 90s. And then the peak that it hit, and then, are we getting back down to some level of normalcy? Some thoughts from your experience in your chair on that.
Yeah, I mean, what I see around the country really is, and it depends on where in the country, right? I mean, let's face it. There's some Some cities, some states that are more accepted of technology, and some aren't. Some are, there's some cities that, in my mistake, in my opinion, it's a mistake where they're anti-technology, where they don't want anything. I think technology is, is the game changer in today's world. I'm not just saying that because I work for a technology company. I just feel like all these, every time I see a new piece of technology, no matter who makes it, whether it's Axon or whomever, or Moto or whomever, no matter who makes it, like I always say, like, man, I wish I had that when I was, when I was back in the day, a taser or, or whatever. So what we do see is in certain cities, they're just anti-technology because their concern is privacy. Their concern is spying. I'm not going to say that those aren't warranted or those opinions aren't warranted or whatever, but I think they're doing a disservice to the police departments. My opinion on technology is, we give the cops guns and we hold them accountable. Why wouldn't you give them the technology, right? Explain that. My feeling is give them the tech and hold them accountable. If somebody does something wrong, deal with it. Like you deal with, anything else. We give them tasers, we give them guns, and we hold them accountable. There's no reason why there's any form of technology that can't be used, or that can't be, that can't be the same thing. Luckily in New York City, we still use technology to our advantage, right? And I think that's a lot of the success we're having in New York City is due to that, plus the great police firm. That, again, I've been everywhere, and the NYPD is the best there is. That's the thing I'll always say, the best there is. So, but I think that is the game changer now. I think the cities that are trying to avoid it do it at their own time. If you don't try to avoid it, accept it and hold people accountable. I think that's the mentality we should have.
Yeah, so let me jump in on the technology. So I'm going to mute you, Joe. So just so we got, I'm going to jump in on the technology because there's a certain air quotes right now, surveillance technology in the form of camera systems, LPR, and a whole bunch of other things. Pete mentioned in the chat, he threw it up on Gunshot Spotter. I think your point is really sound because they, as you said, they'll train you for 6 months, which I think is an unbelievably short amount of time for the level of severity and seriousness that your job is, that you can take a life if justified, and you can take people's rights away from them and put them in jail, and you get 6 months of training. I mean, the magnitude of that level of responsibility for the least amount of training, and then they expect you to work flawlessly is pretty unbelievable. But to your point that you do have the power to use deadly physical force, and yet there are advocacy groups that are out there saying, we can't give these tools to cops. They can't be trusted. So having gone through that with LPR and facial recognition, I know firsthand that the technologies can be powerful and can be misused. However, the penalties should be very severe and the guardrail should be up, and the audit and the technology levels that we have to know exactly who did what when are all there. So this is just really not an attack on the vendors who are providing surveillance, again, air quotes for those who are not viewing. And by the way, if you're on X and you want to get into the chat or any of the other platforms, the best place to be is on YouTube to watch it, to get into the chat. Is the fact that you can give those that like you said, the deadly physical force and not have that, and they want to dismantle this technology because they're worried about privacy and surveillance. I don't believe that that's their cause. I believe this is part of the dismantling and defunding of police. There's nothing, they could care less if the guy down the block is getting surveilled 700 times on an LPR camera and they can track them and all that stuff. They don't really truly care about that. And I'll tell you, the EFF and the ACLU, it's all about collecting money, because every time they write an article and they post it on social media or their website or on some other kind of electronic media, there's always a big fat donate button. right on top that says, look what we're doing for you. Donate $100 to us, please. And that's all this is. It's a complete sham. And the good, hardworking people in all the communities across the country, this is a little soapbox action for me, all across the country are the ones who suffer the most. I'm not suffering if crime. I can take care of my business and I am insulated right here. But the people who can't do that are the ones who suffer the most. And they say they're protecting them and purporting to represent them. I think it's a big sham and a big lie. And I think your point, all my little soapbox speech was because you said it. We can administer deadly physical force when necessary, but we can't run a search against a piece of technology when necessary. It's insane.
When the left attacks a piece of law enforcement technology, it should be worn as a badge of honor. The reason they attack it is because it helps put people in jail, and there's a fragment of our society that thinks the criminals should be coddled and that the law enforcement should be handcuffed. ShotSpotter is a glaring example. I know there are certain communities that wanted to do away with CCTV cameras because it was infringing on people's rights, when the reality was it was helping to lead to people being arrested. That's the problem. You coddle criminals, you get more crime. But there's people who I think are very comfortable with more crime because it suits their needs. And I think it's complete bullshit. Personally, I told Ralph Clark personally myself, hey, when that idiot mayor of Chicago is attacking ShotSpotter as being racist, and Ralph's an African-American, Tommy, you know that. I said, Ralph, you should wear that as a badge of honor. But that's just one of many, many examples, and it's bullshit.
Yeah, I'll just reiterate, like I said, I speak at a lot of police departments, provide a lot of talking points on how certain technologies benefit the community, save money, for police departments, not only benefit the community, help you fight crime, make you safer, save money for the city. Again, has there been misuse of technology? Yes. But hold people accountable, and don't take the tools out of the toolbox of the cops. Let the cops be cops, and in a sense, you hit the nail right on the head. I think certain people want to kind of handcuff the police, and I think technology, it's at your own power.
Your technology in particular, body cameras, all the body cameras, all about it. They have to have body cameras. Till it showed that most of the body camera footage exonerates cops. And now there's all of a sudden this, oh, hey, hold on a second. That exactly solidifies my point. I think that there are just some people that just hate the police. And for them, there's no consequences. Evil people do bad things.
Yeah, I have to admit, and probably shouldn't admit this, do what I do now, but I never wore a body cam. I wasn't a fan of body cams when it first came on the scene in NYPD, but I am a believer now. I believe it protects cops more than hurts them. When I was worried about body cams, I felt like the experienced cops wouldn't be, you would lose that experience. And from speaking to chiefs, some that have body cams already, and some that haven't gotten them yet, and I can't believe there's some people that don't have them yet. But that's what they tell me. It's like, we're afraid our experienced cops aren't going to be cops anymore. That will take care of itself over time, I feel, with training and with, knowing that you have that body cam. But I could say this, just especially the way the body cams and the technology is now, how it helps, not just with video, it shows, how dumb people are sometimes, that's number one. And it kind of protects the cops more than hurts them. And now, they do certain things like translation and live streaming and all of that now. And those are game changers. Those technologies are game changers. The real big thing right now is AI. AI is busted on the scene. It's not going anywhere. It's not, the bad guys are going to use it to their advantage. I know that. And it's going to be one of those things where law enforcement needs to use it to their advantage. It should be monitored. It should be handled. It should be you should oversee it. But AI isn't going anywhere, and it's got to be used for the good, not for the bad. The bad guys are going to use it, just like drones, right? Bad guys use drones, for various things. Why shouldn't the police use it? It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same concept.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah, so let me jump in on that. There's a lot to talk about. So, I'm a big AI fan. I think it'll do great things. That policing, at least in my lifetime, will always have a human in the loop. I think there might be a place for a robot someday. I don't know. I hope I never see it. I don't want to see that. I think policing still needs a soul and compassion. So that's being said, but I love all the tools. I love what they can do. I love what's capable. I'm very familiar with a lot of it. I'm trying to learn as much as I can versus the rest of it. Now, so body-worn cameras, just to show you that body-worn cameras, as an example, just on a funny side stuff, that it is better for the cops than it is for the bad guys. Like, there's a person very close to me that is sucked into the TikTok algorithm of body-worn cameras by police and all the insane behaviors by all the crazy people out there and what goes on. And the cops over and over are massively professional, massively tolerant, and massively patient. And the people just go bonkers. And you know who's even the worst? Like the bad guys you expect, it's all the Karens, if for the lack of a better term. I don't really like calling them Karens because all my friends who are named Karen, I feel so bad for them right now. I had a woman introduce herself to me the other day as Karen, the good kind. She literally said, my name is Karen, the good kind. So, but anyway, but all these like privileged soccer moms are the worst. And there's just countless body-worn camera videos of that on TikTok. If you get sucked into it and you watch like 4 or 5 of them and that algorithm takes you over, you're going to get buried in those. And then they just keep coming and they're just endless. So anyway, anything you want to share with body-worn cameras or any of the technology, Joe? I know you don't represent the company right now, but you are a good ambassador for them and strong technology. So if you want to comment on that, otherwise we'll get back into the career.
Yeah, I just, I wouldn't be in this business if I didn't think it could help communities be safer and help give the police the tools, in their toolbox. Like, I think it's the game changer. I think it's the X factor in policing in today's world. I'm a big fan of it, and it's just the technology is just getting better every year. It will multiply 2x, 3x every year. It's not going to get worse. And I just hope cities and people can understand that, where they can understand how it's going to make their community better and give the police the tools that they need to fight crime. We always have to be one. The bad guys are going to use it, right? The bad guys are going to use technology, to help their cause. We got to we don't have to match it. We don't have to just match it. We have to be better than that. That's the way I look at it.
Okay, so you get promoted to captain, and your first assignment is the XO of Manhattan North?
Yeah, it was the XO of Midtown North.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, Midtown North, sorry.
Midtown
Sorry. Yep. So walk us through that. How was that transition?
Yeah, so, I become the XO of Midtown North after getting promoted to captain. That was, it was being this XO of Midtown North was a great experience. There's really nothing like working in Midtown. As I always said, I'm working Friday, Saturday night, but I'm working, I'm basically in charge of Times Square, which is pretty cool. Like, being in charge of Times Square for the night is a pretty cool job. I don't know what the department was thinking, put me in charge of Times Square for the night, but it's a really great place to work in Midtown. Met a lot of great people there. I always say my only regret about going to Midtown North is that I wasn't there long enough. So I spent a short time there. Great place to work. I worked. The CEO at the time there was a guy named Timmy Burdett, who was one of the chiefs in Manhattan South now. Just a tremendous law enforcement person, tremendous cop. He's the guy you probably see on videos after the Knicks games yelling on the pole horn. Right now in the videos, just a tremendous person, Timmy Burdett. He was the CEO there at the time.
So how do you get to the DA squad? What happens there? Like, where'd that come?
So I just feel it was really the right place at the right time. Cy Vance had just become a DA maybe like a year before that. He just started his run as a DA. He immediately took the position where he was going to do new things. And, forget, Morgan was there for 35 years prior to that. So Vance comes in and he's like a young, new DA, and he's looking to do new things. He started a unit called the Crime Strategies Unit there, which was really about intelligence prosecutions. We have intelligence policing, and he really started something that matched that called the Crime Strategies Unit, was intelligence-based prosecutions. So, he was looking for, a new CO of the DA squad. Somebody called me, again, Uncle Al called me and he was like, hey, I think you should interview for this job. I know a bunch of people were interviewing it, and I'm like, yeah, I kind of having a good time in Midtown North right now, and he's like, yeah, you should go for an interview. I said, all right, and really out of respect to him, I went on that interview, and I gotta admit, like, I went to that interview saying, like, man, I don't know if this is for me. Like, I don't know if this is for me, but I have to admit, like, I had a really good relationship with the Manhattan DA's office, the prosecutors there that I worked with in SWAT and the Special Operations Team. And, we did a lot of great work with them, hand in hand with them. And some of the prosecutors that I worked with were now part of the Crime Strategies Team, and that was like the team that they were going to build the new office around. And I interviewed for the job, and the one thing I'll say after the interview is, like, again, I didn't know if that was for me or not, but after speaking to Vance and he was a gentleman, one of the most, was a gentleman, and he was just so excited about doing new things, and you could see it was like kind of a place where you could do new things, I remember leaving going, man, someone would mind, like, if he picked me, like, kind of like that, because he really won me over in that interview, So, and again, some of the prosecutors that I worked with in that Crime Strategies Team, I knew them pretty well. They were kind of advocating for me, and he picked me, and the rest is kind of history.
Well, speaking of that history, so you spent a lot of time there. And let's go through some of the cases, and you don't have to talk about anything that might be confidential or sensitive. But, like, how does it work with, like, DA's offices and murder for hire cases? I know in some of the reading, the bigger money laundering cases, and then working with the feds, and then where does the squads, like, how does all, like, it sounds like you're juggling a lot of balls in the air with a bunch of different things from a whole bunch of different places. So kind of as simple as you can, because I'm sure it's complicated, but as simple as you can.
Yeah.
Like, all of these big investigations coming in from all different places.
Yeah. So, and that's really the trick of the DA squad, is, like, you're really operating in a gray area. You work for the NYPD, you're kind of beholden to their rules and regulations, but yet really your job, and whether or not you keep your job, is dependent on the DA. At any time, whether, I always knew, like, hey, at the end of the day, like, I work for the NYPD. That's the patch of my arm. It's my job to be here and look out for the best interest of the NYPD. Like, they knew that. But yet, at any time, the DA can basically call the police commissioner and say, hey, I don't want Joe in here anymore, and I was done, right? So your job really depended on, whether the DA liked you or not, really. And it just so happened I got along with Vance really well. The one thing you do is, I was in charge of his security detail. And when I first got there, it was the DSK case just happened. The Dominic Strauss-Kahn case just happened. So that was a whirlwind. And really, my biggest job was protecting the DA at that point. He would get threats. He would get, we did all the threat cases, things like that. During the press, I think it's still on YouTube. During that press conference, there was an earthquake, during the DSK press conference, where we rushed him off the stage. Actually, during the DSK press conference, there was an earthquake in New York City, which I didn't believe until he told me that. Like, so the building starts rocking, and, like, we immediately grab him and take him off the stage. And I was just like, somebody just tried to blow up this building. That's what just happened. And we rushed him off the stage. And he's like, Joe, take it easy. I was from Seattle. This is an earthquake. I'm like, it's no earthquake here. This is New York City. I go to him. So, but getting back to I got off the beaten path there, but getting back to the cases and stuff. So as you know, there's the DA's office has what's called the DA's investigative squad, where some of them are retired NYPD, some of them are not. You know, in the DA's office, they were really great people. We kind of worked hand in hand with them too, as one. Really, you know, I got there and they had more people than me, and you know, and the strength in numbers, and it just so happened retired NYPD guy was the chief investigator there, a guy named John Village, who I got along with really well. John was the chief investigator there, and you know, and certain cases came to us. Like we did all advances, threat cases, any threats. There's a lot of threats against DAs and stuff like that during big cases. You know, the great thing about the DA squad, where we did cases like everything from murder for hire to child porn cases to these huge ID theft and fraud cases. The one thing I realized quick is there's more crooks below Canal Street than there is anywhere in the city. Working in the Manhattan DA's office, you know, you do those white collar cases, and you know they don't come with a ski mask and a handgun, but they you know they're just as bad. You know, that just elder abuse and just taking people's life's fortunes. You know, we were able to do some sensational cases with some, you know, a lot of the best way you could say is a lot of stars like don't really want to walk into the police department and file a report. So a lot of them, they get their lawyer and they end up in the Manhattan DA's office. You know, but more importantly, you know, I always had to kind of, you know, but again, I never lost track of the fact that, you know, like the patch on my arm says NYPD, so you always have to look out for their best interest. And this is one thing I always said, that we never ever step on a squad's case. As you know, that is sacrosanct, right? You never step on a squad. You know, there are times where DAs asked me to do things, you know, and I knew a squad had a case. I'll be like, you know, let me call that squad. I'll make sure it's all right. You know, so there's, you know, again, you're walking that fine line, and you kind of got to serve both masters. It's not always easy. It wasn't always easy. It got political at times, but you know, somehow I survived.
I got to ask you. During my time as a detective in the Bronx, I know the Bronx DA's office was filled with a lot of detectives that had clout. They had hooks, huge hooks. Like one was a great guy, Vic Cipulo, was a big shot with the DEA. I would imagine a lot of boroughs had the same dynamic. Those aren't easy jobs to get. When you talk about politics, did that factor in at all to dealing with personalities, or was that not an issue for you? I mean, dealing with some of the guys who may have had, you know, hooks and had a lot of connections there. I know as a leader, sometimes those folks aren't easy to manage. So I'm just curious if that factored into anything that you had to deal with while you were there. When you talk about politics, I know there's the DA politics, DA squad politics, and then there's office culture. How was that? I'm just curious.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. So to answer your question, yes, I dealt with some of that. But the great thing about Vance, and at the time, you know, one of my chiefs of detectives was Bob Boyce, was Chief Boyce for a lot of the time I was there. You know, I was always able to get some of my guys, some of my people, you know, guys and girls, you know, that worked with me in the 7th Squad, that I worked with in Manhattan South, right? I was always able to bring some of them in. Yes, I dealt with, you know, the occasional phone call and the occasional hook. But you know, I gotta admit, I always did my homework on them, regardless. And I would say 95% of the time, the people that were recommended worked out. You know, you're gonna have your one or two that just didn't work out. I thought they were God's gift to policing, and you know, but I ended up picking, you know, being able to pick a lot of good people, like guys that worked with me in Manhattan South, like Billy McNeely, Lauren Brem, Ray Alisea, Jose Tawala, just tremendous, you know, detectives that I had the opportunity to work with. Mike Enrique, who's on here, I got to bring him in. He protected the DA for me. Jimmy Zakari, who was there when I got there, he was just a tremendous person to have on my side there. He was the delegate, and he was on Vance's. So, you know, the people on the detail, the protection detail, you have to have the utmost confidence in them. The utmost confidence. They have to be, you know, you have to trust them with everything you have. and I was lucky enough with people that were there. Like I had, I had great people that that I trusted. And that's
Good. Good to hear.
All right, Joe. So, wait, hold on. Let me get it. Yeah, there we go. So listen, we're about an hour and a half in, and we're starting to wind down. So let's get into some of the other things. But before we do, any final thoughts? Any other things? Any good stories from the job? Anything on the NYPD? And then we'll talk a little bit about what you're doing since then, and what's going on in our world and in our industry and the greatest profession that we're all a part of. So, any final thoughts before we transition to some of the other things you're doing?
Like we said, before we came on, I really had a tremendous career, where, really a product of the people I've been around, the people I was able to surround myself with, and the places I worked. That's really what my career is about. Like my private life, I've always had a supporting cast, like my family. I wouldn't be who I am today without my family. And my career in the NYPD is really just a copy. It's a copy of that. So, I was lucky enough everywhere I went to be surrounded by great people. And I said this to Pete before, like I'll never be, one of the people that talks bad about the job. It made me who I am. It made me successful with, and I'll bleed NYPD blue. To the day I die. It's really that simple. So, and for unique mastiff, no, I don't consider myself a house mouse. Although I would have liked to got out of the office a little more than I did, so I wouldn't consider myself a house mouse. To answer your question.
Wait, so listen, we like the trolls too. So, Joe Del Duca, you consider yourself a house mouse. Unique mastiffs. Oh, I know somebody who's got a couple of mastiffs. I wonder who that is. It's pretty interesting. So I got some feedback the other day that I was at a barbecue with a whole bunch of cops and people at a barbecue the other day, and they said, "Man, that fucking guy hates you." And I go, "Well, that's fascinating to me, because you know why? I never met the guy. Never shook his hand, never looked him face to face. And I doubt he would have said face to face to me, 'I fucking hate you.' We probably would have had a civil conversation." So it's really funny that someone would walk around saying, "I hate somebody." Now you could say this behavior was this and this behavior was that, and this person said this and I didn't like that behavior. But if you follow what I'm saying. So anyway, it would be really nice to like we like the trolls too. So it's so good. And I know it came from the podcast. So.
Well, I gotta give a shout out to one of the LinkedIn users because he's speaking about the NYPD cybercrime task force that we used to do some really great cases with the cybercrime task force, what we call peer-to-peer cases with child porn. Those were tough cases, child porn cases. We also did some counterterrorism cases with intel on fraud. The way fraud is used to fund groups in this country. We did a lot of great cases with intel. That's where Paul Morrow was in intel at the time. So, again, in the DA squad, you get to do a lot of cool stuff that you normally probably wouldn't be able to do in squad. In a precinct squad, I should say.
Yeah. Shout out to Gus. Thanks, Gus. Yeah. Okay. So listen, I want to call something out, and then we're going to switch over. So Joe, Mike Recupero, Jimmy Sheehan, who are now three of you have all been on the 10-4 Tavern podcast, and then Chief Jeff Angermeyer and Chris Whitting from the Bergen County Sheriff's Office in New Jersey all had a nice dinner at the National Real-Time Crime Center Association conference last year. And so those guys are still active, but shout out to them for doing a great job. And Bergen County, New Jersey, really crushing it out there. So shout out to those guys for really running great cases and and doing really good things. We had a great conversation, great time, a little Mexican food and a margarita or two, or not. You might not have had, I don't know, salt, no salt, rocks, slushy, whatever. But so anyway, shout out to those guys. I hope they're listening, and if they're not listening live, they'll be listening on the replay. They sent a shout out to you, Joe, as well. So those guys are great guys. So all across the country, not just the NYPD, Joe, but all across the country, I'm sure you met great cops as well. And let's get into that with the National Academy.
Yeah, so I went to the FBI National Academy in 2016. I went to class. I was in session 263. Shout out to my 263 classmates. And really at the time, I think I had 24 years on, and it was something like kind of like I needed, I felt like, and I always wanted to do it. My old partner, John Rogers, was an NA grad, and he was always going to the conferences, and I always had to hear from him, some of my other friends, how fun it was, and blah, blah, blah. I kind of felt a little left out, so I always heard good things about the NA. And really at the time, like I said, I had maybe 23, 24 years on, and I kind of needed something to rejuvenate me. I guess we all get that, get to those places in our career where we feel like we're just stagnant and need some kind of jolt. And I felt that a little bit, like the city was, a little crazy in 2015. Lou and Ramos were killed, at the end of 2014, I believe it was. And the city was crazy after that, with a lot of, that's kind of when the first, civil unrest kind of started, I felt. And so I just kind of needed a breather, and the FBI National Academy gave that to me. And, it turned out to be one of the best experiences I've had in law enforcement. And if there's anybody out there that's thinking about it, I don't know what you're thinking about it. It was really one of the best things you could do in law enforcement. I met such great people. The classes were great. The training was great. But really the benefit of the NA is the people you meet, and the networking. And, I've stayed involved with the NA since I left. So you become part of the association after you leave the NA. I'm now the vice president of the New York chapter. And again, the president is the legend herself, Terry Tobin. She hates when I call her that, so I do it anyway. But Terry, our chapter is hosting the national conference in Niagara Falls in a couple of weeks, and it's going to be the first time in the history of the National Academy where the host chapter and the national president's Billy Carbone, and Terry is the host chapter president, are from the same department, which is the NYPD. So it's going to be a great moment for us. And I'll just mention one other thing. I really got immersed in the NA because our class in the NA was a very tight class. We had a couple of people. One comes to mind. Rich Ryan was one of my classmates. He was a captain in the Ronnequan Police Department upstate. And Rich got brain cancer while we were in the NA. And he had to leave the NA. And I remember that as being a moment where our class kind of came together. And then after we graduated, and one of the people is in that picture with Texas, is Clint Greenwood. So our class is the only class that ever had two people killed in the line of duty after graduating the NA. And one of them is Clint Greenwood. He's on the far left in that picture with the Texas flag. So that flag, when the Dallas cops were killed, I actually flew that flag in front of my house. So they gave me that flag. The Texas guys, they do a one night in the NA called Texas Night, and they gave me that flag. It was after the New York trip. So there's a weekend where we take everybody to New York, the whole class, and they gave me that flag, and they said, "Hey, this is for New York, for showing us all a good time in New York City." So then, when the Dallas cops were killed, and when Clint was murdered, I flew that flag in front of my house. I still have it today. One of my most prized possessions.
Well, that's a great story on the Texas flag. Holy cow. Yeah, so first of all, one comment on Texas. It's the only state in the country that flies the Texas flag, not the American flag, in front of their houses. So I think that's pretty funny. But I think what I'm hearing, Joe, with the National Academy, and I had an opportunity to go, and I didn't make it. I passed on it because of family issues, and timing wasn't right, and it never worked out for me. Unfortunately, it's one of my regrets, because they had finally lowered it. It was always captains and above, and they finally lowered it to lieutenants. So I always had that regret. But the brotherhood really is strong. And what it really does is you find out, because the NYPD, let's face it, as much as we love it, the three of us, we kind of think it's us and everybody else sometimes. And we get away from the fact that everyone's doing the same exact job somewhere else with just a different color uniform, a different badge, and a different patch, but it's the same work. And
it's funny. It's funny if I could just comment on that. It's funny you say that. So you get to the NA and you immediately figure out that everybody there wants to know you because you're from the NYPD. So you're from the NYPD. Like, you don't realize what the rest of the country thinks of us. You know, like, they consider us the gold standard. You know, and they kind of, when you get there, they want to know you. They want to know what the NYPDs do. And it's funny you said that because, you know, and I just love meeting these other small city cops and just, you know, like, we don't understand, like, being going to a call and not having backup 20 minutes away. Like, you know, we had the biggest gang in the city at our fingertips, you know, at the radio, right? So we don't understand what that's like. And I just have tremendous respect for so many cops across the country after going through the NA. Because you're right, we're in New York City, like, we think everything revolves around us. We think everybody's like us and the rest of the country. It's really the furthest from the truth.
So and I'm going to do a shout out, Responder Bourbon right there. So Joe, remind me, let's text. I'm going to make sure that Kevin Barrett, Chief of Terre Haute, Indiana, gets you a Responder Bourbon bottle. We'll make sure you get that since you're a bourbon drinker and you had a teetotal tonight with a little H2O. But like what Mike Marino guest hosted for Pete that week, Pete was working and was encumbered, and Mike Marino did a great job guest hosting and reading every single chat out loud. But what we've really figured out was, like, you know, some larger agencies might look at a Terre Haute, Indiana, and, like, you know, turn their nose up at it, like, oh, those guys, like, how busy could they be, you know? And what I was able to hear with Mike's line of questioning to Kevin and getting to know him was, it was like working in a precinct, a very busy precinct. And yes, we have 76 of those, and some are much busier than the other. But I'll tell you what, I'll bet you there's some cops in Terre Haute, Indiana, that could hold their own in some of our toughest precincts here in New York because of what they were going through and what they experienced versus some of the slower precincts in New York City. I remember being on vacation and someone saying, "Oh, you're an NYPD cop." You know, you're getting to know each other and you kind of feel, do you want to tell anybody or not? And you trust them. And then they say, "Oh, there's another New York City cop. You guys are on the same job." And I go, "Yeah, where do they work?" And when they told me where they worked, and I worked in a 7-9, I was like, "Yeah, we're not on the same job." Like, we have the same, our paycheck is the same, but and it was more of a joke to say you could be really busy in a really violent place, or you could be in a really nice place, and that doesn't lessen anything in police work, because when the bell rings and you got to go chase a bad guy, even in a precinct that doesn't have a lot of a crime, you still got to be a policeman or a policewoman. But so again, with your National Academy brother and sisters, I've never taken for granted, and definitely after I transitioned and traveling all over the country like yourself, meeting all of these great cops, like, there's some rocking and rolling places. And then you learn, like, I'll give you an example, Hoover, Alabama. All right, there's not a lot of violence in there, but man, do they have stuff going through there because of the corridor, the I-10 corridor, and the trafficking and the stops that happen. And when you hear about what they're doing and how good they are at spotting traffickers and how to intercept and interdict them and how to take them down, and the shit that they've gone through in that, and how they identify rental cars, and, you know, yeah, they're profiling. No, they're profiling the little red dot on the back of the car that indicates it's an Avis rent-a-car, but it's got a whole bunch of stuff on the back deck, like baseball hats. Like, it's really fascinating. Like, nobody that has a rent-a-car has, like, their personal fluffy toys and baseball hats on the back deck, but they don't realize that that little red dot on the rear bumper indicates that it's a rent-a-car, but they're trying to make it look like it's a personally owned car. And so I've always been fascinated by the level of ingenuity and intelligence and creativity by cops all over the country. So sorry again.
I couldn't agree more. That's kind of my favorite part about the job I have now is just going to these different police departments and learning about, the unique and different problems that they have. Because everything is not New York City. Every place isn't like New York City. I'll go back to technology and what can technology do? What can technology do to put the tools in the toolbox of those cops? But the one thing that will never change in policing, I hope it doesn't change, and you hit on it before, is like there has to be some kind of human factor in it. Is one thing that'll never change no matter where we are is, the public calls and we show up. That's what happens. It's as old as time. The public calls us and we show up, and we're expected, to keep them safe. It happened on day one of my career. It happened on 9/11, and it's happening every day, throughout the country. And those cops, the more tools they have in their toolbox, before they get to that call, on the way to that call, can be all the difference. Can be all the difference in that call.
So Paulie on X is asking about your Cougar. I'm guessing because he's put car Mercury Cougar, not the Cougar, as the colloquial term for attractive mid to late age women. But I told you this is the demographic, true crime women demographic, 40 to 60.
Yeah.
Across the country.
It is true. I went to New York High School and I had a Cougar, a white Cougar. So I don't think it was a Guido car though. I kind of that's a little.
I had a white 1979 Cougar. It had with the red Landau roof.
Yeah.
Guido car. But
I had a white Cougar. Yeah. So I don't know who Paulie. I got a feeling I know who Paulie is because I remember Paulie from high school who was on the police department. So I got a feeling I know who Paulie is. But I did have a white Cougar in New York High School. Yeah, but I didn't think it was a Guido car.
What year was your Cougar?
What's that?
What year was your Cougar?
88? I want to say 88.
Oh, yeah. Mine was a 79. The hood was like looking down like a tunnel. It was like so long.
Yeah, different model. It's a different model. Yeah. Good cars. Great cars.
Yeah.
All right. So you do a lot of work with Tunnel for Towers. And everyone knows, and I think anyone who's paying attention knows that this is probably the go-to foundation and charity for cops and military, first responders, fire, EMS. Joe, what are you doing with Towers? I know you spend a lot of time with them. So
yeah, I got into Tunnel to Towers through my dad. My dad, like I said, retired Army. He was doing volunteer work for Tunnel to Towers for like 10 years. He got me involved in doing fundraising as a volunteer for the Tunnel to Towers. As the years went on, I just got more involved and was more hooked into the cause, into the mission of the Tunnel to Towers. And then I became part of their National Golf Committee, a volunteer member of the National Golf Committee. And, Tunnel to Towers does such great things for cops' families, catastrophically wounded veterans, people in the military that are killed in the line of duty overseas. And really it was, that's my daughter there, calling me a rock star. Thanks, Bray. Tunnel to Towers is really a grassroots organization. I mean, it's huge now, huge. I mean, there's people that donate land. They donate millions of dollars. Imagine having enough money to donate land, right? There's people that donate so much now. And it really started as a grassroots, foundation that was on the backs of volunteers. And a lot of it is still like that to today. The National Golf Committee that I'm on, again, mostly volunteers. Some of them first responders, some of them are not. And just the amount of time they put in, really, because the mission is just it's sometimes overwhelming, but it's such a great cause. if you should be, if you can't, during COVID, I remember, I think we're up to about 200 outings per year now that go to the various programs of the Tunnel to Towers. During COVID, we had only one. We had only one during COVID, one outing, and that was in Myrtle Beach, started by my father actually, and this guy Dave Boucher, who was my father's colonel in the army. But now we've grown so much, and it's really been on the backs of volunteers. So if you're not involved in the Tunnel to Towers, even if you do the $11 a month, I can't tell you how far that $11 a month campaign goes. Just think about it. If 1 million people sign up for $11 a month, that's $11 million to house a homeless veteran, to take care of a catastrophically wounded warrior, take care of their family. God forbid if a cop dies in the line of duty, the Tunnel to Towers immediately just buys their home. Not like next week or next month, like immediately pays off their home. So, I can't speak enough about this organization and its mission. It's really an amazing organization.
Well, all right. I think Pete and I will both agree. T2T.org, by the way, everybody. It's on the banner, and if you're only listening and not T2T.org, T2T.org. If you want to donate, and like Joe said, $11 a month goes far. You see all the commercials. You see it on social media. You see it everywhere. The Sillers. It's just a tremendous story on the brothers and what he did to running through. I think it was the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, right? And then everything he's done, and all the homes and all of the charity and good work that they've done. By far, I think most, I can't say all, I can't speak for everybody, but most first responders, military members think that this is probably one of the finest organizations and charities to donate to. So $11 a month. And Joe, I got to give you credit. As a knuckle dragging cop who, had to fight through getting his bachelor's, wasn't a great student, but you did that math pretty good. $11 a month times 1 million years is $11 million a month. That was great. So well done.
Yeah,
well done.
That's that public school education. That was an easy one.
Yeah. So tell us about this picture as a golf outing for T2T. So we got a picture up there for you.
Yeah, so this is the Veterans Day golf outing. So it's the largest golf outing in New York City every single year, by far. It's about 400 golfers, about 700 people at the dinner. It's every Veterans Day, unless Veterans Day is on a Saturday or Sunday, in which case it's then on a Monday or Friday. So it's every Veterans Day. It's our largest outing of the year. It's kind of the signature outing that the golf committee does. And these are just some of my fellow Axon friends and one of the greatest pipers of all time in the NYPD, Dan Sprague. So
yes.
And some of the people I work with in Axon was a great supporter for the last couple of years of the Tunnel to Towers. The golf committee is very special to the Silla family because, when Stephen was on his way home, he was heading to play golf with his 3 brothers. And he hears what happens in Manhattan, heads back, gets to the firehouse, they're not there, drives to the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, can't get through, parks his car, puts his gear on, and he runs through the tunnel. Hence the name Tunnel to Towers. So the golf portion of the Tunnel to Towers is very special to the Silla family, and this event is really one of the signature events.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Joe, for bringing those 2 issues, the National Academy and everything that does for law enforcement across the country, and the brotherhood and sisterhood, and the camaraderie and the sharing of information and the friendships and the alumni, how strong it is. I've heard that the strongest alumni in the country is the Virginia Military Institute. All the frats and all these other things, but I think VMI, you talk to any military member who went to VMI or knows about VMI, they'll tell you about VMI. I think the National Academy for Law Enforcement is the same thing for VMI for the military. So that being said, Pete, any final thoughts? Because we're going to go to Joe for his final thoughts, and then we'll do some house cleaning, and we'll wrap this bad boy up.
Yeah, a couple things, man. First off, I concur 1,000%. Tunnel to Towers is a great charity. I donate. I have a friend who was shot in the back of the head and paralyzed, breaking up a fight in a bowling alley in Orlando. An ATF agent was with his family when he was shot. Tunnel to Towers bought his house within a few weeks. He did survive. I know some other agents and some cops that who have benefited from what they do. And I know that not a lot of their money goes to salaries. It goes to the people that need the money. So God bless them, and thank you for what you do, Joe. The other thing I want to say, man, is I never met you. We never crossed paths. And I don't hold it against you that you went to the FBI Academy. As an ATF guy, we have a rivalry with the FBI that's healthy at times, unhealthy at other times. But one thing, I think I would have loved working for you, because everything that you talked about when you talked about your assignments, you always gave credit to the people and the people around you. And I am a huge fan of Chief Match. He took care of me when he was chief of Bronx Detectives. I love the man. He's a good dude. Any friend of Chief Al Matarasso is a friend of mine, but I think we would have had a good time if we ever worked together. And I, too, am in the law enforcement technology sector. So I hope we cross paths at an event in the future where me, you, and Tommy can raise a beer or the adult beverage of our choices and catch up. But it was an honor talking to you today. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Pete. I really appreciate that coming from you and Tommy. Like, that means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. I'd love to have that adult beverage with you and Tommy one day. That'd be great. And I really appreciate it. It's really an honor for me to come on here. I've seen some of the past guests, and I was like, man, I hope I can live up to this. So it's really an honor that you guys asked me to come on here. I really appreciate it. To all the cops out there and all the people that are listening, if you're active, be safe. Be safe out there. If you're not active, enjoy, pay that pension and live your best life, as much as you can. So, as I told you earlier, Pete, like I'll be blue, the NYPD blue and for the rest of my life. So and this means the world to me. I know my kids are watching too, so they got a pretty good kick out of the out of the collage you did for me on Facebook and stuff. So that means the world to me. And thank you guys so much. It really was a pleasure. It was my pleasure.
So I told you, it's AI, baby. It's AI. It's AI. So just for everyone who knows, Pete and I have full-time jobs. Joe has a full-time job, but Pete and I do this podcast once a week for 2 hours, but it's a lot more than that. And so we have to collaborate. We have to coordinate with the guests. We have to get their bios. We have to write social media posts because we want to promote it. But not for AI, we would not be able to do it because it saves so much time. I load up a bio. I tell it I need social media. We get it out, and Pete and I share it, and we do that thing, and it's really click, click, click. All you have to do is ask for it, and that's one tiny sliver of what AI is capable of, and it's really good. And then so you load up a picture, you tell it, you give it a really strong prompt, and it takes 30 seconds, and you got 30-second picture. That picture, that collage of you, Joe, 3 years ago, before AI was capable of doing these things, probably would have taken a week of back and forth and hours and hours and hours of back and forth iterations. It took 15 minutes. Not less than this.
It was awesome. I was like, oh my God. When I started, I sent it to my kids, and they were like, oh. My son, he's 21. He was like, yeah, that's thick. Yeah, that's thick.
So what's really great about that is you're not the first person that has asked for the original PNG or JPEG because they want to take it home and do something with it. So you didn't ask for that, but that's how nice it is. It's pretty friggin' good. And so and that's why I'm appreciative of AI, and I'm excited about where it's going to take us because of all the good. And for everything that is bad about AI, there's a counteraction of good that could defeat the bad stuff for sure. So with that, Joe, thanks for coming on. And you're very humble and saying that our guests, and yes, we've had some great guests, and the journey for Pete and I, as we're approaching our first year anniversary, has been the Pete's guests that I've met that I've never knew before that are now friends, and we interact and text and email. It's like our little National Academy frat, the 10-4 Tavern alumni, 51 guests so far, excuse me, and counting. But you know what? You're very humble, but I would say as a policeman, if you don't get paid for what you've done, you get paid for what you might have to do, right? And what you might be called upon. And you're very humble, although I'm sure you've done some great things and some great cases and some great SNU work and some great narcotics work and everything. But when the bell rings, I think you're one of those guys we want to be there in the trenches. So, Joe, I think it's more than you're letting on. You're very humble, but thanks for that. And Ron Layson coming in with our tagline right here, telling the stories that need to be told by those who need to tell it. So thanks, Ron. Appreciate it. That's the Tavern. That's what we always tried to set out to do. So with that, any last final thoughts? And I'm going to go into the housekeeping and we're going to wrap this thing up. And we'll be right on time at 9:05 for a 2-hour on the mark. Any final thoughts, guys, before I get into it?
God bless, man. Thanks to all our listeners today. And again, Joe, man, really honored to cross paths with you. Hope in person one day, but real impressed with your humility and how you give credit to those around you more than you give to yourself. That speaks a lot about a leader, and didn't get lost on me, brother.
Thanks, Pete.
Okay.
And we got to have that adult beverage. And thank you very much again, both of you, and God bless.
Yep. We'll see you guys out there. All right, so hold on, Joe, and if you want to stay on and stay in the green room after, we'll do a hot wash, if you will. Rob, Blue Cash, always likes a hot wash. So tomorrow morning, 8:05, Marlon, John, Eric, will the NYPD fail again? Let's hope not. Let's hope they have things under control. You know the bad guys are going to act up. The ones who act up, in my opinion, they're not even Knicks fans. It's kids who want to do that. So hopefully the NYPD is going to be there. They'll talk through all of the logistics and stuff that they need to do for the upcoming parade. And having been to the Yankees parades and the Giants parades, it's a big deal. And it's a big undertaking, in addition to all the other things the NYPD has. And I think, Joe, to your point, when you were talking about before, the gold standard, if not anything else, certainly the number of demonstrations, the number of parades, the number of events are astronomically greater than any other city in the United States of America, probably in the world. It is fun.
I have faith in the NYPD. When you were part of New Year's Eve, the way I was in Midtown North, nobody can pull off New Year's Eve every year like the NYPD does. So I have faith in them. I have faith in them. There's still a lot of good leaders.
Yep. So let's do it. Let's do it, men and women, boys and girls. Let's get it together for the parade, and John, Eric, and Marlon will break it down. And by the way, I can do a whole episode with you guys and anybody else who wants to do it on New Year's Eves. I did 19 of 20 New Year's Eves. I was there every year for 19 years out of 20. I loved every single one of them, from the wild and crazy to the hugs and kisses and rose petals. It went from wild and shootings literally 5 feet away from me to just like absolute love, and it was wild. I could do a whole episode. I could do multiple episodes on New Year's Eves. Okay, so Ron and Rob tomorrow night at 5:05, the Executive Perspective on Wednesday, June 17th, 5:05, 17:05 for those doing military time. Same thing. From their perspective, as a retired inspector and a deputy chief from SOD, is the NYPD prepared, and how will they handle the championship parade? How will people behave? How will they act? All the different nuances of what that means from their perspective tomorrow night at 5:05 p.m. tomorrow night. So with that, guys, that's a wrap. We're going to call it, and I have 1 minute to spare, and we are within our 2-hour time limit. So thank you very much, Joe. Really appreciate it. Great guest. You're a great friend, a brother forever. I'm sure I speak for Pete, and we're going to call it a night. So with that, we're out.